Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Labor Day weekend travel plans? Get ready.
We've got about 1,500 sailings in place.
The flights are booked at nearly full.
We hit the ferries, the airport, and the highways to see what travelers should expect. Plus, should BC change its wildfire fighting approach?
If others in the world, Australians and elsewhere can do it, we can absolutely do it here in British Columbia.
Political pressure on the province to change its strategy around evacuation orders and push back to the return of a controversial program.
To make a decision like this is really unfathomable.
Anger over the redeployment of police officers to Vancouver schools this fall.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Anita is away tonight. Well, 6 p.m. on the Labor Day long weekend, you know what that means. A flurry of travel at the ferry terminals, the airport, the border, and on the highways. Our Janella Hamilton leads us off tonight from the Horseshoe Bay Ferry Terminal. So, Janella, BC Ferries has been plagued with problems all summer long. Set the scene for us right now. How are things shaping up where you are?
Well, Tanya, it appears to be smooth sailing here at the Horseshoe Bay and over at the Tsawwassen Terminal. Many people we're speaking to telling us that there hasn't been much of a wait at all. A lot of people making reservations this August long weekend instead of risking it. And that has been the message that BC Ferries has been touting all summer long. If you don't have a reservation, don't show up at the terminal with a vehicle. And it seems like that message is actually resonating with travelers. BC Ferries says this year's August long weekend, it saw a 23% reduction in customers driving up to the terminals without a reservation in comparison to last year. This has led to a 56% drop in passengers with vehicles experiencing sailing waits. At the same time, an increase of about 20% of foot passengers on board. But of course, with a summer of cancellations and delays due to mechanical issues and staffing shortages, BC Ferries says they are prepared for whatever the weekend holds.
We've got about 1,800 employees working per day over the long weekend. We've got about 1,500 sailings in place. So we do expect to move lots of customers, probably over 500,000 customers, and about 200,000 vehicles.
Typically, the long weekend Monday is one of the busiest days, but with school starting, BC Ferries says it is expecting a high volume of travelers this upcoming Sunday.
Now, Janella, we've also checked in at YVR today. What can passengers going through the airport expect this long weekend?
Well, of course, Tanya, they are also experiencing a lot more passengers than usual. In fact, they're saying about 316,000 people will be traveling by air this August long weekend. That's an increase of about 60,000 people compared to last year. If we're talking a little bit about where are people headed to the last long weekend before, school gets back and a lot of people get back to work, this is some of the top destinations that people are traveling to this long weekend.
Calgary, Toronto, Winnipeg, and Montreal are the top destinations across Canada. Into the U.S., travelers are going to San Francisco, Los Angeles, Vegas, of course, New York, and Chicago. And then from an international perspective, where travelers are headed from YVR, London, Hong Kong, Delhi, and Frankfurt.
No matter how you're traveling this weekend, officials are saying pack your patience, plan ahead, and of course, arrive early.
Some familiar advice there. Thank you so much. Our Janella Hamilton reporting for us from Horseshoe Bay tonight. If you are planning on hitting the highways this long weekend, well, good news on the gas front for some. Prices at Metro Vancouver pumps have taken a bit of a dip. Prices have been surging above the $2 mark this summer, but today dropped as low as $1.91 a liter. One expert says it's because of local refining and transporting capacity. Still, he cautions prices can be hard to predict in the long run.
We are living in a world with volatile oil prices on international markets that will always translate into up and down swings at the pump. But there are also increasingly shortages in refining capacity. And when we reach these capacity limits, and that means the prices will go up as well.
He adds gas prices generally come down in September, but that's also when diesel prices usually increase. Well, still on the roads, one of the Okanagan's busiest stretches between Kelowna and Penticton will remain closed through the long weekend, all thanks to Monday's rock slide.
Yesterday, we were able to complete an aerial assessment of the slide. And what that identified for us was actually a risk of further rockfall. We've identified tension cracks that are 2 to 3 meters wide, and some of them are over 5 meters deep. So obviously, this is causing a significant amount of concern for additional risk to the highway.
So crews are still assessing this area just north of Summerland. The Transportation Ministry is urging drivers to fuel up, bring extra supplies, and be prepared for conditions to change quickly. The roads will be patrolled as well to help provide help if needed. The province has warned the detours will likely tack on an extra hour or hour and a half to your journey. As we usher in September, some recent rain and cooler temperatures have helped the wildfire situation in the south. But in the north of the province, dry and windy conditions may ramp up the risk once again. As Renee Filipponi reports, crews in both BC and the Northwest Territories are still facing danger.
Strong winds have fire crews in the north working hard to protect Hay River. It was evacuated weeks ago, but the fire is still dangerously close.
Working to push back on this fire that's just 1.5 kilometers away from downtown. And our team's doing a really good job. Boots on the ground, aircraft in the air, heavy machinery doing hard work.
Fires have also forced the closure of a section of highway leading to Yellowknife. The re-entry plan was paused, but there is positive news for evacuees. The city released a schedule that will see the general public headed home next Wednesday.
We're not going full service right away, when you come back. The hospital will have fewer services. We won't have the arenas open the day after you return. Grocery stores will have a few staff, but they won't be fully staffed.
Okay, here we go.
In BC, the situation is improving as the reality of the destruction is setting in.
That's my house. Oh my God.
This is all that's left of Mariko Nagata's West Kelowna home. She went on an organized bus tour of her neighborhood.
I was astonished at how forceful nature was to take out. I could see through my garage way into the other backyard. So yeah, everything was gone.
So my mission today is going to be to get rid of these.
In the Shuswap region, crews are trying to make the area safe by taking down burned trees that pose a danger, while others continue to contain the fire.
This fire isn't going to be put down until the snow flies.
And there are already lessons learned when it came to fighting this fast-moving fire. In recent days, locals who stayed in evacuation zones have been given training to work with fire crews.
I really think that we need to put this type of training on at least annually. Every spring it should happen before the fire season.
Preparing for the next fire season before this record-breaking one is even over. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, campfires are once again allowed in the Southeast Fire Centre, mainly because of successful firefighting efforts there.
Due to the hard work of our crews and our resources, as well as ongoing favorable weather conditions in the past 2 weeks, all of our previous wildfires of note are now either considered being held or under control.
The ban was lifted after a shift in the forecast and some recent rainfall, but in Cranbrook, locals have mixed feelings about it.
It's been one of the worst summers that I can remember with the amount of fires and the size of the fires. It was so dry, and then it was so hot as well, combined with the dryness. We just didn't get enough moisture until the last couple of weeks. I think that's made a huge difference in the decision to lift the fire ban, is because there's been so much moisture.
It's better to be safe than sorry. Too many people have lost lives and homes, and it's just so dry and so hot, the hottest year we've seen. So yeah, I don't believe it should be lifted right now.
It's probably about time. I think things are much better. So.
Yeah, we got some rain this week, so you're not worried that it's too dry out there still?
It's been a long haul, and I think people need some relief.
Category 2 and Category 3 open burning is still banned. That means any fire larger than 0.5 meter wide by 0.5 meter high. It has been 2 weeks since a state of emergency was first declared as BC's wildfire season ramped up. Evacuation orders are still affecting thousands of people in the Okanagan and Shuswap regions. But the official opposition is calling on the government to review how those orders are being managed. As Justin McElroy explains, they want the province to look halfway across the world for inspiration where a stay or go strategy gives evacuees the option of leaving or staying behind to help fight the fires.
In the last decade, BC's wildfire seasons have changed. So, should the Wildfire Act that governs the province's response change as well?
There's a tremendous amount of lessons that should have been learned by now from previous fire seasons that just haven't fully been embraced.
BC United MLA Todd Stone argues tensions seen in the shoe swap the past few weeks, combined with the Monty Lake fire in 2021, show a need for new rules around how evacuation orders are managed.
If we want different results, we have to do things differently.
He says the BC Wildfire Service needs more money, particularly for community engagement. Stone claims more support is also needed for regional districts, who have often been overwhelmed when climate emergencies begin, and he's pushing the government to look to Australia, where wildfire volunteers play a bigger role, including defending their property.
We can work on insurance, we can work on liability, we can work on safety certifications and training, all that stuff. But I'm confident if others in the world, Australians and elsewhere can do it, we can absolutely do it here in British Columbia.
An Alberta professor who studies wildfire response says incorporating more volunteers makes sense, but cautions against governments encouraging folks to stay behind explicitly to fight fires, especially if they're not skilled.
Communities and people have to be extremely well prepared to be able to do that safely. And so unless that high level of preparedness is there, I wouldn't advise that.
The BC Wildfire Service acknowledges the need to integrate locals into certain firefighting situations, as happened recently in the shoe swap.
We want to work with local governments. We want to work with fire departments across BC, as well as the general public that are willing and want to support response should their communities see an impact from a wildfire in the future.
But with this year's wildfire season still underway, the province is reticent to talk too much about potential future changes to wildfire policies around evacuation zones. But that won't stop the Union of BC Municipalities conference later this month. They're expected to talk about what they would like to see from the province, considering next year's wildfire season is only 9 months away. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
As summer nears its end, the city of Vancouver is winding down its tolerance of alcohol on some beaches. The pilot program launched at the beginning of June. It allowed public consumption of alcohol at 7 Vancouver beaches. But that's set to end Monday. The park board says it's been collecting feedback that'll help determine the future of the program. However, drinking in certain areas in several parks across the city is still permitted. Well, don't worry, there are technically still a few more weeks of summer to soak up. But for many, the season unofficially ends with the coming of the Labor Day long weekend. Our Liam Britton spoke with some Vancouverites about how they feel as they squeeze out every last drop of summer.
For many, Labor Day long weekend marks the unofficial end of summer. The days getting shorter, the weather getting cooler, the lattes getting pumpkin spicier. But how do Vancouverites feel about this unofficial changing of the seasons? Well, we went out and we asked. It hits different, right, when kind of summer ends?
Yeah, no, it's like you're always happy when winter ends. You're happy when, like certain season starts. When summer ends, you're like, oh, not again.
I actually think the seasonal depression thing is fully real. With when it's raining and cloudy, it sucks so much.
I look forward to summer all year in Vancouver. More so the winter that I worry about.
I'm excited to wake up on a rainy morning and have a hot coffee and read, so I think I'm ready for it. I'm kind of tired of the really hot weather.
I do like the sunshine, however, I know we need the rain, and so, practically speaking, I think it'll be good for us.
I think fall's beautiful in Vancouver, or like Vancouver Island's really nice too. I think some people even prefer it to summer.
I like about fall jumping in late.
Great, this guy's got such a wonderful attitude.
The sun may be setting, but plenty to soak up still in the season's final weeks. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
No words, except maybe I'll stick with the iced coffees for a little while longer yet. Our Darius Madavi joins us with a first look at the forecast. And there is a bit of a mental shift, isn't there, with September 1st and the weather. But hey, it's still nice out, and it looks like temperature-wise, we're about where we should be, maybe, for this time of year.
Yep, pretty warm tomorrow, really. Tomorrow is our warm day of the long weekend. So if you are also not ready for summer to be over, and want to spend one more day drinking on the beach, tomorrow is the day to do it. Temperatures do come down a little bit on Sunday as we have some cloud and the potential for some rain moving in. It seems likely that it will miss most of Vancouver, but we'll talk more about that later. Monday, similar temperatures to Sunday, so really tomorrow is the time to be outside if you're going to be. In terms of smoke, we do have the chance of some more of it making its way to the coast, but I did say that yesterday, and some good news. The rain that we saw in the interior didn't just help with fire danger, it also seems to have trapped some of that smoke and suppressed smoke activity, which is why we have some pretty nice skies today, and hopefully that'll be the case tomorrow as well. On Sunday, similar smoke forecast again, so hopefully that rain will continue suppressing the smoke activity, but we'll just have to see as we head into the long weekend. Tonight, expect an earlier sunset, no more full moon, unfortunately. We're waning again. Pretty nice temperatures heading into tomorrow morning. And then for our long weekend forecast, pretty much what we spelled out. Most of this rain that we see in the forecast for Sunday and probably Monday as well is likely to be further inland. So if you're on the water in Vancouver, hopefully just some bit of cloud.
All right, well, definitely lots to enjoy still. We'll talk to you at the end of the show. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
After much debate, what used to be a familiar sight in Vancouver schools is set to return. 2 years ago, the district's school liaison officer program was eliminated. But last fall, Vancouver voters elected a new slate of school trustees on a promise to bring back the program. As Belpuri reports, that will happen come Tuesday.
Not only students, but police officers will return to Vancouver schools next week. The district school board has reinstated the heavily debated school liaison officer program.
No student is required to engage with SLOs. I think that's a very important part. And the program was reimagined, listening and leaning into a lot of the voices and concerns.
15 Vancouver police will have offices in 18 secondary schools, but will also work to support the city's elementary schools.
We have heard a lot of feedback from people who are in support of this program and who wants this program to come back. And we also acknowledge and appreciate some of the people who didn't have a good interaction with the police.
In the spring of 2021, the school board of the day eliminated the SLO program over concerns about the impact of a police presence on students. The controversial decision followed a review, an independent third-party report which found a majority of Black and Indigenous students don't feel police in schools helps foster a sense of safety. During last fall's civic election, the ABC party promised a return of the liaison program. In November, freshly elected school trustees passed a motion to implement a revised SLO program in time for the new school year.
I'm disappointed with the trustees, which is one of the most diverse school boards that we've ever had, would take a position that is in such opposition not only to the Black community, but to many people within the general community.
Board officials maintain the program has been revamped.
It is important to all of us to have safe, welcoming, and inclusive schools. And since the board motion in November, the VSV staff and VPD staff have been working together to work on a reimagined SLO program.
Starting Tuesday, school liaison officers will deploy with a more casual look instead of full uniforms. They'll drive unmarked vehicles, and while they will be armed, pistols won't be visible. Belpuri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Marine officials are sounding the alarm over what they call rampant illegal fishing up Indian Arm.
People catch a rockfish, and they're not supposed to have it. They just throw it back, and they quite often die. So again, we can't have this mortality. It ultimately affects the overall conservation goal that we're striving for here, is to protect those rockfish and have the population grow.
Fishers are drawn to pink salmon stocks in the area right now, but they're also catching rockfish within 3 conservation areas. The pens are meant to increase rockfish populations. Fisheries officers have handed out dozens of tickets in the past 2 weeks. Coming up, BC's childcare subsidies kick in today, but some operators say the province has been leaving them to make up the difference in the meantime. We'll hear from one owner next. And thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Members of Windsor's Black community are once again voicing their support for the restoration of a 64-year-old structure in a park. It was center stage for many Emancipation Day festivals decades ago. In the years since, it has been neglected, but there could be new life for it just yet.
I look at that and I just see so much potential.
Actor Leslie McCurdy, who is also the chair of the Black Council of Windsor-Essex, says the bandshell could be used for outdoor performances.
And I know there's the thought that there will be a stage in the new downtown Esplanade that's being built, but I've seen the plans for that. It's kind of just a little stage. It's not something that would have equipment to really do full productions, whereas this potentially could.
The bandshell used to serve as the focal point for events at numerous Emancipation Day events throughout the 1960s. Motown greats and other luminaries have graced the stage, so it's on the city's heritage register. And people in the Black community say it should be restored to preserve the city's history.
Different organizations have tried for years to get the city to come and look at restoring the bandshell. That's where the Miss Sepia contest was. That was where the Sunday service was.
But it would cost around $100,000 just to study what needs to be done to restore it, and a lot of things would have to be considered during the restoration.
I think the initial first steps are to determine the suitability of the structure itself and what it would take to make it a usable space, a modern space that would comply with current accessibility standards, while certainly also taking into consideration that there are heritage components of the structure. So it's very much that initial stages, that is what we have to determine first.
McCurdy and Talbot say any money spent on the bandshell would be recouped by the tourism it would attract.
I always say that only with great risk comes great reward. So, and you have to spend money to make money.
I think that would be a feather in the City of Windsor's hat to have this bandshell redone.
Councillor Kieran McKenzie requested the report last year. He's in favor of moving ahead.
I think we all understand in the community the heritage and historic value of that bandshell, of all of the things that have happened in this space over the years. So let's take a real good look at what it would take for us to return and restore this space into something that the community can once again be proud of.
The Community Services Standing Committee will receive the report next Wednesday. The committee doesn't have to take any action on the report, but if they do recommend that the city spend the money on the study, the report still has to go to City Council for approval. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
Welcome back. BC's childcare subsidies extension starts today.
That budgetary line item is a big deal for families right now. And so our government is taking steps to help with some of those costs that families are seeing.
The province is kicking in up to $145 per child enrolled in eligible programs. That includes half-day preschool or before and after school care. It's expected some 43,000 kids will benefit. The payments will go directly to the child care centres. But some operators say the provincial government is not paying them in a timely manner. Our next guest is Jennifer Radcliffe, the owner of Pebble Lane Childcare in Surrey. Jennifer, thanks so much for joining us. Let's get right to it. Tell us about your experience in getting these government payments.
So to be eligible for the government payments, you have to go through a lengthy application process that takes place every year. It starts in March. And it's up to the government how long it takes. There's never an indication of how long it's going to take to get the funding. And it becomes very stressful when it comes down to the last few weeks before you're expecting to receive the funding.
Bit of a guessing game, it sounds like. How do you plan for that financially, and what kind of impact has this had on your business?
You really can't plan for it. You're hoping basically that you're going to receive the funding, and you're hoping that you don't have to pass those expenses back on to the parents. The parents are not really prepared to take those amounts back on after they've been told and promised by the government that it's going to be covered. So it's a very difficult situation.
So today is September 1st. Where are you in the process of getting approval and the funding?
So I started my application back in March of this year, and when it came to late July, I began calling, wondering where my funding was. With each phone call, I was just told, it's in the last moments of processing. We're not sure when you're going to get it. And after advocating for myself, contacting members of parliament, I eventually got a reply. I've been told that it's been processed. I'm still waiting for the funds to be received.
So do you know if any of those payments, I suppose, will be retroactive? Like if you're having to front the costs in the meantime, will you be reimbursed for this period of time later? Do you know?
So if there are missed payments because it's been too slow, then we don't get that back. We have to start from where they give us the funding for. So we were hoping that we could start what we wanted to in September. Now we're pushing that back to October. So there's definitely been a loss.
What are you telling parents? And if you do have to pass those costs along, I mean, what kind of dynamic does that create in your industry? I assume you're not the only one going through this.
I'm definitely not the only one going through it. It creates an extremely stressful dynamic. Parents are not the people that we want to have to go to and let them know that they're on the hook for $900 extra a month with short notice. That's not something that any parent wants to hear, and it's really tricky for us to be put in that situation.
So finally, if you had the province's ear right now, the ministry, how would you like them to fix the funding model for childcare?
I think they definitely need to look at the way they structure their processing times and slow things down so that they can take advantage of what the providers really need and make it quicker for them to receive funds. I don't think that daycare should be having to wait 6 months for funding. And if there are delays or things that they need to communicate things much quicker.
Jennifer, thank you for your time today. I wish you the best of luck, and hopefully we can get an update as you go on. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
That's Jennifer Radcliffe. And coming up after the break, economists expected a slow growth for Canada's economy, but turns out it shrunk instead. We'll find out what that means for interest rates next.
We reported last week on the decline of home prices in Vancouver, but houses in Vancouver are still the most expensive in North America, and apartment rents are among the most expensive. As Russ Patrick reports, college and university students are particularly hard hit this month as they search for a place to live.
The apartment vacancy rate in Vancouver is the lowest in the country, nearly 0%. And what is available is very expensive. A bachelor apartment can easily cost $350 to $500 a month. And rooms in private homes are also very expensive.
It would seem that prices are up generally 25 to 35%. That may be a reflection of mortgages that people are having to renew, or it may be some instance of people believing that the market supply situation allows them to charge more for accommodation.
Another problem facing students is the severe shortage of dormitory housing. At the University of BC, 7,000 students have signed up for on-campus housing. There are beds for only half that many. Simon Fraser University has 1,500 applications for 220 beds. At UBC, they've distributed 50,000 copies of this flyer, begging people to put up a student. New listings are posted every day, but many of them feature accommodations that are less than desirable.
What are you getting $475 in one of these basement suites?
Just a room, that's it. You might have to share a bath, or you may have your own bathroom. Nothing else, no cooking.
No, not even a hot plate or anything?
Not even a hot plate. This is just a room, a sleeping room, bedroom.
But not all students are having to settle for minimum housing at maximum prices. Laurie Knapp from Mississauga, Ontario, had almost given up trying to find accommodation when a room in the Peggy Forward house was listed. Forward's son is going to school back east this fall, and she decided to rent out his room. With 3 meals a day, it'll go for $300 a month. But not everyone is that lucky.
Where are you from?
From Halifax.
How long have you been looking?
Been looking for a week now.
And how does the situation look?
It doesn't look very good at all.
How much are you going to have to pay?
About $400 for 2 people.
Basement suite?
Yeah, most likely, without a kitchen.
The people who run BC's colleges and universities are worried their enrollments are going to drop if out-of-town and out-of-province students stop coming to the West Coast because of the scarcity and high cost of housing. Russ Patrick, CBC News, Vancouver.
Welcome back. Canada's economy has shrunk slightly, according to the latest numbers from Statistics Canada. And as Anis Hadari reports, it's yet another sign that interest rates could stay right where they are.
Economists were expecting the economy to grow far more slowly than before, not to contract. But that's what happened. Canada's GDP got smaller by 0.2% in April, May, and June. That's compared to the year before. That contraction led by a drop in housing investment. New construction of homes took a plunge in every province and territory except Nova Scotia. Household spending in Canada slowed down too. Several economists have said this is potentially good news for the Bank of Canada, which has been raising interest rates to try and cool off a hot economy. But many of those interest rate hikes are still to hit the economy and Canadian consumers.
What we're looking at right now in the data that we just got from Statistics Canada is the full impact of those very first rate hikes that we saw back in March of 2022. So we have not yet felt the brunt of all of the interest rate hikes that have followed up until July.
There are projections that this drop in GDP could mean the central bank may not increase the interest rate next week. Canadians will find out if Tiff Macklem and the Bank of Canada agree with those projections on Wednesday, when their next decision is released. Anis Hadari, CBC News, Calgary.
The Canada Revenue Agency has fired more than 100 employees for taking advantage of CERB payments. The Canadian Emergency Response Benefit offered $500 a week to workers whose jobs were affected in the first months of the pandemic. As Marina van Stackelberg reports, the agency says it has zero tolerance for inappropriate claims.
The very government agency responsible for managing pandemic benefits for Canadians has now had to fire 120 of its own employees for taking CERB money they didn't qualify for. The Canada Revenue Agency is still investigating hundreds more. The union says the cases are across the country.
Some cases are black and white. People knew about the system, knew the criteria, and they still applied, and it's very hard to defend them. In other cases, some people have, I guess, a better case, or there was a misunderstanding or a lack of comprehension of the program, even if they work at the CRA. In some instances, some employees had a second and a third job.
The employees who have been caught will have to pay back the money, and CRA isn't ruling out involving the police if there was criminal wrongdoing. In a statement, the country's Minister of Revenue writes, "The confidence and trust that Canadians put in the Canada Revenue Agency is a cornerstone of Canada's tax system. The disciplinary measures imposed show that for us, it is zero tolerance. These cases must not call into question the integrity and honesty of the more than 60,000 CRA employees who work in an exemplary fashion to serve their fellow citizens." The CRA says some of its staff actually did qualify for CERB because they were on student contracts or temporary employees. Its investigation found about 30 people that fit that situation who will not be fired. Marina van Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Well, heritage building advocates are speaking out after reports that 24 Sussex won't house any more prime ministers. CBC News reported earlier this week that the federal government is exploring other sites to build a more modern and secure residence. But as Catherine Tunney tells us, that has angered some in the capital who have ideas to save the mansion.
For years, prime ministers have called this place home. It's also been called a rodent-infested death trap and a security risk. But for this heritage proponent, a building still worth saving.
If you have a pest problem in your house, your first reaction is to call a pest control company. It's not to call the demolition company.
He's speaking out following news that 24 Sussex might never house a prime minister again. Sources say the government is looking at an entirely new site to bolster security. Donné's group believes 24 Sussex can be saved for less than what it would take to build a new home, and less than the $36 million of public funds that the National Capital Commission estimates it would take to renovate 24. But saving a piece of history, for Donné, priceless.
How many historic events have to occur in a place before it's recognized as historic? Okay. The fact is, everybody from monarchs to presidents to constitutional discussions have occurred in this living room.
He's not alone. An architecture firm in Ottawa wants to preserve the home too. It's published an unsolicited proposal to save the main home, while adding a modern wing to host official functions, with hopes the new Minister of Procurement will at least give it a look.
This is not a new debate. What to do with 24 Sussex is a perpetual question, one that politicians are more than willing to kick down the road.
This will be, of my list of priorities, this will probably be the last. We don't need a new home for the Prime Minister. We need a new home for working class Canadians.
For others, enough is enough.
I think it's embarrassing that a G7 country can't provide a safe, secure residence for the head of government.
Ottawa has said it could make a decision about 24 Sussex by the fall. A chance to finally learn the fate of this building. Maybe. Catherine Tunney, CBC News, Ottawa.
Well, the stateside now, Washington City is rolling out a pilot program today to try to reduce crime involving youth. Specific areas of the U.S. Capitol will see a curfew imposed on kids under 17. As Katie Nicholson is finding out, the idea is not a new one, and some are questioning its effectiveness.
This is one of 8 neighborhoods where a new juvenile curfew is about to kick in D.C. This after a massive spike in violent crime, up 37% compared to last year, and a number of high-profile violent incidents involving young people, including this fatal shooting of a Lyft driver in July. 4 teens caught on camera running away. Young people also repeatedly the victims of gun violence.
So here's how it's going to work. Anyone under 17 won't be allowed out between midnight and 6 a.m. on weekends and 11 and 6 a.m. on weekdays. The mayor and the police chief say this isn't supposed to be punitive. It's about keeping kids safe.
So we checked in with a recreational center in one of the neighborhoods affected to see how they're feeling about it. This is a center that has lost some of the kids it works with to violence very recently.
We just want to make sure y'all safe, y'all getting home safe. So many babies and so many older kids and younger kids are dying just hitting from stray bullets. You get what I'm saying? So, yeah, I'm praying on it. I'm standing with them with it. If I see him outside, go in the house. I know it's curfew. Point blank period.
But at least one of the teens who's been going to that center for 3 years doesn't think this curfew is going to have a major impact on safety in the neighborhood.
It don't matter what time it is when something happens, so it is what it is. They ain't stopping nothing.
Now, this isn't the first time that D.C. has enacted a juvenile curfew. They were actually quite common back in the 90s under a Clinton-era crime bill. But research has shown that juvenile curfews aren't particularly effective when it comes to curbing violence. Nonetheless, you've seen in the last year here in the U.S. about 12 cities bring them back in. And this latest one here in D.C., well, this is just the latest community to try and recycle that idea. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Washington.
Still in the States, 2 more members of the right-wing extremist group, the Proud Boys, will spend at least a decade behind bars. Today, they were handed long sentences for their roles in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. But as Chris Reyes tells us, an officer who was injured that day worries it won't change some people's minds.
This defining moment in that violent attack on January 6th will mean 10 years in jail for Dominic Pizzola, the man breaking the window with a stolen riot shield, breaching the building. Proud Boys. And for Ethan Nordine, seen here leading a group to the Capitol on that day, 18 years. In court, Judge Timothy Kelly called what happened a national disgrace as he handed down the heavy sentences. Pizzola has been convicted of several charges, including assaulting an officer and robbery involving government property. Nordine of the more serious charge of seditious conspiracy. After he was sentenced, Pizzola raised the fist in court and said Trump won. In a statement released after their sentencing, the U.S. Department of Justice said the two men recruited and participated in every consequential breach at the Capitol, adding that Nordine and Pizzola mobilized and led a group of Proud Boys onto the Capitol grounds, leading to the dismantling of metal barricades, destruction of property, breaching of the Capitol building, and assaults on law enforcement. One of those police officers injured, Michael Fanone, who's concerned that even with such punishing consequences, many still believe the election was stolen.
Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to have the influence on other Trump supporters and MAGA supporters and other elected members of our government who continue to peddle the lies. I think that the ripple effects of January 6th will come to haunt us for probably all of eternity.
Nordine's sentence ties for the longest in all the Capitol riots convictions so far, but next week, prosecutors are asking for 33 years for Enrique Tarrio, the leader of the Proud Boys. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
Well, backlash is growing over new regulations for natural health products. The concern is that the new rules will drive up prices. And CBC News has learned the opposition wants to do something about it. Olivia Stefanovich looks at the debate that has Health Canada on the defensive.
Supplements, which is, In Wajia Qureshi's natural health store, she worries everything from supplements to apple cider vinegar and green tea could be threatened by new Health Canada regulations.
The prices will go high, and many of the products people will be unable to buy.
The conservative health critic says the changes are the #1 concern he's hearing from the public.
It's a financial issue, it's an issue about self-choice, it's an issue about freedom of choice.
Health Canada now has the ability to immediately recall any natural health product and force producers to update their labeling. But the most contentious change is still to come. Health Canada wants to charge producers the cost of monitoring and approvals, fees that range from hundreds to tens of thousands of dollars.
I'm a little bit worried that Health Canada is missing the mark.
Opposition parties plan to hold parliamentary hearings about the changes and summon Health Canada officials to testify.
And we should not hesitate to tell Health Canada to go back to the drawing board.
No one from the Liberal government was made available to speak to CBC News. The Health Minister's office deferred to Canada's chief medical advisor.
There's been a lot of misinformation, disinformation out there.
She says the changes ensure natural health products are not making false claims about what they treat or cure, and the cost will be much less than what Health Canada charges Big Pharma.
There is no intention by Health Canada to stop the sale of, restrict access of, or to ban any natural health products.
Health Canada is reviewing thousands of comments from public consultation before charging the $5 billion industry the cost of being regulated. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Well, the federal government is putting efforts into preparing Canadians for a greener future. It's invested millions of dollars for new electric vehicle charging stations. Problem is, only a fraction of the number of planned are actually up and running. Ottawa is blaming the delay on supply chain issues and the time it takes to get permits and approvals. Peter Cowan has more on what that will mean for drivers.
The federal natural resources minister has been traveling the country handing out money to build charging stations like this one. He was in Quebec City where he handed out $25 million to build 1,500 new stations. It's a big priority for the federal government.
In support of our goal to add nearly 85,000 publicly funded zero-emission vehicle chargers to Canada's network, the federal government is investing to deploy more chargers where they are needed most.
But new numbers obtained by the Canadian press show there's a big difference between promising to build them and actually building the charging stations. Of the 43,000 that the federal government has committed funding for, only 7,600 are actually up and in use. That's less than 1 in 5. Overall in this country, about 10% of the cars being sold today are electric vehicles. The federal government wants to increase that, and one of the reasons that car buyers say they're reluctant to buy new electric vehicles is because of a lack of charging infrastructure. Federal government's own analysis shows that in the next 2 years, this country's going to need 52,000 charging stations, which means it'll be important for the federal government to go beyond just promising stations to actually building them. Peter Cowan, CBC News, Ottawa.
And still ahead, Hong Kong and parts of mainland China are bracing for an approaching typhoon. More on the storm warnings and the preparations next.
Does he fall on the top?
Like many childcare centers on the island, this one in Montague is full with a wait list nearly 300 kids long. The owner says there's no room to expand this space, so she's been trying for years to buy, build, or rent a bigger building. Problem is, she says, nothing is affordable.
We've been looking at expanding since, I'm going to say 9 years, with no success. We've went federal, provincial, we've knocked on every door possible. We cannot do it without support from the government.
The investments. So at first, the Prime Minister's childcare funding announcement last week gave her some hope. The federal government promised around $4.5 million to help centers around PEI add 300 more childcare spaces.
Going on a bear.
But here's the thing. That money's specifically for centers that applied last winter for additional spaces at their existing buildings. There's nothing to help those looking to move into a new building or to start up a whole new center who are being held back by high real estate and borrowing costs.
So you can have.
In last year's federal budget, Ottawa did announce a $625 million childcare infrastructure fund, but Foote says she doesn't know if or when she'll be eligible for help through that. She and some other operators did meet with federal and provincial officials last week, though she says they didn't give any clear answers.
They say this money's there, but they never let us know what it's for until the applications come out to do the funding. I'm hoping that they just realize that, they need to get this rolling. They need to give the money to the people that actually want to grow.
Now, for the PEI government's part, a spokesperson said the province is still in talks with Ottawa about how that infrastructure fund can be used and when PEI will see some of the money. At the moment, there are around 2,000 children on the childcare wait list, and demand is only expected to grow with the population increasing and daycare getting cheaper for families. It's expected to go down to $10 a day at early year centers by the end of this year. Steve Bruce, CBC News, Charlottetown.
Hey, I'm Johanna Wagstaff.
And hi there, I'm Rohith Joseph.
And we're asking for 10 minutes of your day to go through the 10 things that the UN recommends we can all do when it comes to climate change.
Please don't leave.
No.
And also, the things aren't new.
We are just wired to not do them.
We promise you to help you figure out your brains, and you and your people can make better choices to combat climate change.
10 Minutes to Save the Planet is available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Let's take you overseas where tens of millions of people are taking shelter as Typhoon Seola batters Hong Kong and parts of mainland China. Hong Kong issuing its highest storm alert. Forecasters say winds have reached almost 200 kilometers an hour. Authorities say it could be one of the strongest to hit the region in decades. Serious flooding due to heavy rain has been recorded, with water levels reaching as high as 1.5 meters in some areas. Hundreds of flights have also been canceled. Let's bring in our Darius Madavi now with another look at the forecast. Darius, seems we're seeing these type of events more and more often.
Yes, well, we are reaching the peak of Atlantic hurricane season, often similar to the peak of Pacific hurricane season in the Northern Hemisphere. And here we can see Seola as it makes contact with mainland China and Hong Kong. As you said, the winds are extremely high, so expect more impacts to come. We'll hear them through the long weekend. You can also see another hurricane over here. This is Hurricane Hannah or Hurricane Haikui, depending on which country you talk to. And we can see that it is expected to make landfall in Taiwan later this week as well. So pretty active systems happening here right now. We can see the path that we're expecting Seola to take. It was a super typhoon not long ago. It did lose a bit of strength as it approached the mainland, but still did hit as a very strong, or is making landfall as a very strong typhoon, expected to continue along this path. And then we have quite a bit of uncertainty, but it will rapidly lose strength as it does continue along the land because it doesn't have those warm waters of the Pacific to continue drawing strength from. Meanwhile, here in BC, we have this historic drought situation. I want to just emphasize how much of a difference this is from last year when we were heading into a really record-breaking fall drought situation. We know that those impacts have carried over into this year, which is part of why we have had such bad drought conditions this year, but definitely something to keep an eye out for as we head into the fall. Hopefully we get some more rain than we did this time last year. Speaking of rain, if we take a look over the next, through the long weekend, we can see that Sunday we get another pulse of rain through the southern interior, potentially making it to parts of Metro Vancouver. I said earlier that inland is likely going to see the rainfall there, but it is very uncertain. We will see likely a few scattered showers through the area. And then on Monday, we see another pulse of rainfall through parts of the interior and for Vancouver as well. Now, if we take a closer look, we can zoom in on Vancouver at a more fine-grained model. So this doesn't take us all the way to Monday, but we can see that on Sunday, we're expecting to see some of that rainfall come through, at least very briefly, but it won't last very long. So it should still be a relatively sunny, albeit cloudy, a bit cloudy day. Tomorrow, we have that clearing pattern that we were talking about moving up through the province, temperatures staying high before they come down again on Sunday. And then if we take a look longer range in Vancouver, we have those 2 days of really light showers, sunny again on Tuesday, and then maybe some showers returning for Wednesday before we clear up once again.
Not a bad unofficial goodbye to summer, I suppose, this long weekend. Thanks so much, Darius.
Thank you.
Well, many of us have them, stuff scattered around the house that we don't use anymore. You could throw them away or donate them to be sold. But in Strathcona County, Alberta, there's a special spot that allows people to make an exchange. Have a look.
The Hodgepodge Lodge is a community reuse building. The concept that one person's trash is another person's treasure. So everything that people bring in here is free and everything you can take out is free. So the idea is that we want to keep everything out of the landfill and hopefully find a new home. So the first thing we do is have them weigh whatever they're bringing in. If they're going to drop something off, we have them put them on a table. Then we have a volunteer come and they take everything from the tables and put it out on all of the shelves. And then people can come in and take a look around, see what they need, take something out. When they leave, we ask them to weigh it on the way out, so we can also track the items that are also leaving. Surprisingly, a lot of the things that come in do go out. So things that often don't go out are things that are broken or too worn out to be used. And so those do end up going to the landfill. We are on the recycle station site, so anything that we can recycle, we do. So anything that's electronic, metal, glass, anything like that does get recycled. We have seniors coming in, we have newcomers to Canada coming in looking for things for their new homes. We have teenagers moving out, people going back to school, kids looking for toys, you name it, everybody comes here.
We were getting rid of a lot of our stuff, and it was good to see that when we dropped it off, people were excited to have some of the things we brought in. They took them right away and were super excited. I work with special needs kids, and they always need a refresh of the things they have, so there's always lots of things that I can find here to entertain them at school. It's absolutely amazing because all of this stuff would have been in the landfill otherwise, or into donation centers that some people can't even afford that. So it's fantastic.
We have diverted about 280,000 pounds of goods have come in, and 280,000 pounds roughly have gone out. This is a great place so that people realize the things that they may not have a home for, somebody else could reuse somewhere down the line. So we do keep things out of the landfill just based on it might not be useful for me, but it could be useful for somebody else.
Well, still ahead, your garden can be full of dandelions and weeds if you don't look after it, but sometimes a little surprise might crop up. We'll explain next.
Both the city of Summerside and those facing homelessness are calling on the province to add more shelters to the area. City staff say they're trying to help the homeless population, but they need buy-in from the province.
We need everybody to stand up and say, hey, enough, enough, enough. Human lives matter, and we're all human beings.
Doug Rogers is one of the city residents struggling to keep a roof over his head. What little shelter space the city has is often at capacity.
We have a Lifehouse shelter for women, but it's not a low barrier shelter. So any of my clients that are women that are using can't go into that shelter. So they're on the street. We need housing, we need emergency shelters.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a provincial, responsibility, but not one that we don't want to provide supports to as a municipality. We want to play a role in how we can help establish a 24-hour low-barrier shelter in Summerside. Our police services are suggesting that it's definitely a need. We're continuing to request those supports in Summerside.
In an email, staff with the Department of Housing said provincial housing staff are actively working with city staff and community partners to discuss options and determine what the specific needs for Summerside may be. Recently, Summerside city staff approached people sleeping outside in public parks, asking them to remove tents and tarps being used to create shelters at city gazebos. Alicia Whitlock helps distribute food and supplies to those in need.
Where would they like everybody to go? These people are desperate. They have nowhere. They don't feel like they belong anywhere. They literally just try to find somewhere safe to lay their heads at night to get some rest, to prepare for the next long day.
Housing advocates say there are about 60 people in Summerside sleeping outside. Some were using the showers at Credit Union Place, made available since post-tropical storm Fiona last fall. City officials say the program ended shortly after the storm. However, advocates say access to the showers was taken away 3 weeks ago.
I say that that's a stopgap situation, that if we had 24-hour services in Summerside, that would be part of it. It's not as easy as just opening the doors to any public facility for wide open for anyone to come in and have a shower.
There is an upcoming meeting Wednesday evening at Credit Union Place. While homelessness will be discussed at that meeting, city staff say it's not the focus. The plan is to workshop ideas for affordable housing for the entire community. Tony Davis, CBC News, Summerside.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On September 16th, join CBC Vancouver at the second annual Come Toward the Fire, a free outdoor festival celebrating Indigenous community, culture, and creativity. Visit cometowardthefire.com. And September is Literacy Month. Have fun and support the cause by joining CBC Vancouver's Dan Burrett at Dakota's Team Trivia Challenge on September 27th. For tickets, register at dakota.ca.
Police in Nebraska made a rather unusual traffic stop this week. A car with two horns and a massive bull between them. This bull is named Howdy Doody. The police got a call about a man driving through the town of Norfolk with a cow in the passenger seat. Officers say they had expected to see, say, a small calf inside the vehicle, definitely not a 900-kilo steer. The car had actually been modified to make space for the bull to ride shotgun. The driver was let off with a warning and told to take Howdy Doody back home. A man in Windsor, Ontario got quite the surprise in his garden over the summer. A 4-meter-tall sunflower that had suddenly popped up out of nowhere. It's named Bertha. David Garlick says they think a squirrel somehow planted the seed sometime in late spring. At first he thought it was a weed, but decided to let it grow just to see. Garlick says he continued to water Bertha and watched as she shot up. If you're wondering about the name, by the way, well, he posted some pictures online and turns out a former student suggested Bertha. Congrats on Bertha. That is the show for this Friday. For news anywhere, anytime, download our free app, CBC Gem. For the very latest, anytime as well, you can head to our website, cbc.ca/BC. Thank you so much for watching tonight. Have a great long weekend.